My name is Linda Tirado. I'm a writer. I live in the woods and drink whiskey in keeping with my idiom. And I write about how much it sucks to be poor. I live in Ohio, but I live in the West Virginia bit. My Walmart is over the Ohio River, so like technically I'm an Ohioan, but culturally West Virginian. I'm from Utah originally, so I'm a mountain girl. So I was a night cook in a tiny town in Utah, worked at an overnight shift at a diner, and I told people on the internet that it sucked to be poor, which for some reason people considered news. And then the very long internet comment I had written was taken to be an essay and went very viral. And 3 weeks later, I had a book deal. So then I wrote a book because I'm not stupid, and they offered me money, so I took it. And ever since then, I've been a writer because my book was largely about how much the service industry sucks. And it turns out you're not really terribly hireable in the service industry if you famously will write books about how much your bosses suck. There's two words that apply to my life, and they were a perfect descriptor in their totality. And one is exhausted, and the other is hopeless. Which, I mean, I worked two essentially meaningless part-time jobs because it was the work I could get, took care of my husband and kids, and then I'd get up the next day and do it all over again. I mean, I'd have a 16-hour workday on an average day, and I'd come home with, $100 to show for it. And with that, I'm supposed to make some kind of a life, which, nope. And that was it. I'd been doing that since my first job in food service when I was 14, and I'd worked in food service ever since, basically. Just bars, restaurants. Every now and again I get a retail gig as cashier or something, and that was it. That was the sum total of my life, start to finish. That was what I was going to do until I died. There's no amount of work you can do to become not poor. Because they don't pay poor people for the work that they do perform. So if I'm working a 5-hour shift at restaurant A and a 5-hour shift at restaurant B, but I've got a 3-hour commute in between, and I've got an hour and a half commute there and an hour and a half commute home, that's 15 hours to work the 10 hours. And again, I'm working at $7.50 an hour. So after taxes, I'm bringing in somewhere around $6.75, $6.50 an hour for that 15-hour day, but I'm not getting paid for most of it. And it's that unpaid labor that's the exhausting bit. The problem isn't that people are lazy. The problem is the wages aren't high enough, that the market is not, it turns out, a great setter of wages. It doesn't work like that. And so you get these things where people are like, oh, if you just work a little harder, if you were just a little... Okay, look, meritocracy is a bullshit word we made up. It was used in a sci-fi novel to describe dystopia, for God's sake. Secondly, the entire idea of the bootstrap myth of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps was supposed to be an idiom for doing the impossible. That's where that idiom started. The fact that we've taken meritocracy and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and turned them into some kind of life advice for the poor, it goes beyond idiocy and into sheer lunacy. It doesn't make any sense. And one of the things I'm salty about right now is that they've just come out with a study, and people are hailing it as a landmark new discovery, that it turns out poor people have a lot of shit on their minds, and the cognitive load of poverty actually does impact your brain and the way you can function. And they are hailing this as a new kind of... Dude, I wrote that book 4 years ago. There's an entire chapter about that in that book. You could have asked any poor person for the last 50 damn years, and they would have told you that the cognitive load, the cognitive stress, the emotional stress of poverty takes something out of your soul on a daily, day-to-day basis. The overwhelming effort that it takes for us as a society to decide to keep the poor just blows my mind, and always has. The Steinbeck quote that I'm going to butcher, there are no poor people in America, only temporarily embarrassed millionaires. And that notion... And it's true in America to an extent because we don't have a classed society. That you can... I'm a foul-mouthed night cook from rural Utah, and I keep time with presidents. That is a uniquely, I think, American truth. The thing is that we've bought into this American dream, made it unattainable, and then continue to tell people to dream that. In my parents' generation, back in the 50s and 60s, you could graduate from high school, go get a job, you'd own a home, you'd be able to start a family. In my generation, I'm 35 years old, I'm the oldest millennial. We are the first generation in American history that's expected to do less well than our parents. We have always been on an upward trajectory in America, and it's starting to become not true, but we as a nation haven't caught up to that truth yet. The thing is, the poor are supposed to feel bad about their poverty. We're supposed to feel as though we have been properly punished for whatever we did in a past life that landed us here. We are not supposed to be human, because if we were, they would have to stop and think about how they treated us. You can't walk into a McDonald's and throw a cheeseburger at a human being. You can throw a cheeseburger at a cashier. Fuck the burger flipper, right? Like, they're just burger flippers. But if you stop to consider us as whole human beings, then you would have to stop and consider how you're treating us culturally, societally, institutionally, systemically. Here's an anecdote. So I was at a Christmas party in New York City, and a friend of mine who is a broadcast journalist had invited me. And I was introduced to the room. This is Linda. She's poor. Because that was the interesting thing about me, is that I was poor. And that's why I was in the room, because I clearly didn't fit. Poverty is, I think, harder simply because the people who are living in it don't have time to write books. If I hadn't gotten the deal and quit my job and written the book, it would have taken me a decade to write.